Now, as you're watching the approaches I'm going to show you here, once you feel like you've seen the approach that you prefer, you can just stop watching the worked out solutions. But I always like to be thorough and show you how you would do it by hand, just in case you want to know how to do it for your actual math class. So in this case, whenever I have a function like this, and I'm essentially trying to find solutions, I'm going to go to Desmos in the upper right corner. And if I had any previous functions, which I do, I'll click on the gear icon and then delete all. And we're going to go ahead and type this in. Let me zoom in a little bit so it's easier to see. If you have a touchscreen, you can just kind of drag like you would your phone, or you could press Control plus to zoom in on your computer. So let's go ahead and type this into Desmos. And to do so, we are going to use the keyboard that's in the lower left corner. So I'm going to zoom out a bit, click on the keyboard, and notice in the lower left, there is an absolute value option. So let's go ahead and drag here so we can see it. Click there, choose absolute value, and we could continue typing it from there. However, let's also look at how you could do it using your actual keyboard. You may notice that above your enter key on your keyboard, assuming that you have a pretty standard keyboard, you'll see a vertical line as well as a backslash. So if you hold shift and that button, it creates the absolute value symbol. And we'll go ahead and type x minus 7. Now, because it knows what we're trying to do, you could actually just press the right arrow key and then press equals 1. And you don't have to worry about actually pressing the shift and that button again. And what we're looking for are the solutions. And let's go ahead and take a look at the graph. So notice we have two vertical lines given to us. Well, that's because they're saying the two solutions are x equals 6 and x equals 8. And whenever you have x equals a number, it graphs as a vertical line. So now we got the two solutions as 6 and 8. They want us to find the value of the sum of those solutions. Well, we know 6 plus 8 is 14, and we'd be all set and can move on. However, just to show you a couple different options, I think this was the best approach. However, you're always able to type in those two functions separately. So in other words, we had y equals this absolute value function, and since it had a variable in it, I don't have to put y equals. But for the 1, I do have to put y equals, so it knows I'm referring to this horizontal line. And in that case, I'm looking for the x coordinate of the intersection of the two functions. And notice 6 is this x coordinate. I can press that to go ahead and get it to show up there, and I can even label it if I want right there. And then we can see the x coordinate here is 8. I'll do the same thing, and then I'll put label. And we could see the x coordinates are 6 and 8, and then add them from there. You could probably see that the very first approach we did was the easiest. But again, it's good to understand how to do this. If you're wondering how would you do it by hand for your actual math class, let's go ahead and look at what absolute value really means. You might be wondering, well, I know absolute value always becomes positive, but if you're unsure why that is, absolute value really means the distance from 0. So what's the distance from 2 to 0? Well, that distance is 2. The distance from negative 2 to 0, that's also 2. So if instead we had absolute value of x equals 2, we're basically saying what value or values has a distance of 2 units from 0. Well, you can imagine both positive 2 and negative 2 have a distance of 2 units from 0. So in this case here, if I had absolute value of x equals 2, my two answers would be x equals 2 or x equals negative 2. And that displays the actual approach we're going to take, where first we remove the absolute value symbols and just write the equation as is. And then we say or, and we keep the left side the same, but do the opposite sign on the right side. So let's apply that approach here. So we have the absolute value here. Now, something that is good to know, if I had anything in front of it or after it, I'd have to first isolate the absolute value. But in this case, it's already isolated. So we can go right away and write it two ways. Let me go ahead and rewrite it here so we have a little space. The two ways is just removing the absolute value symbols. The second way is keeping the left side the same, but flipping the sign of the right side. And now solving each one by adding 7 to the right side, which gives us our two solutions, which when we add, we get 14.